have here a handout which will become apparent to you as we go on. I hope, at least, that's the intent. Otherwise, make a paper airplane, smoke it, I don't know. This is a continuation of our presentation in 2009, where I started everything with a rabbit stew recipe. And there's an old American recipe for rabbit stew. First direction is first catch your rabbit. And our rabbit here, like all rabbits, seems to have expanded from the traditional 5 Central Asian states to incorporate both Azerbaijan, Georgia, the Ukraine, and tangentially, only for purposes later on, which hopefully will become clear, Moldova, but they do exclude Pakistan and Afghanistan because both by language, culture, and everything else, they are completely, they are quite different from most of Central Asia, except for perhaps the northern part of Afghanistan. And all the areas that we are talking about up here, from Turkmenistan all the way to this area up in here, Xinjiang province, are they present geographical challenges for a whole host and variety of reasons. One is that the boundaries today are disputed quite vigorously, and the Chinese want parts of Tajikistan and Kyrgyzstan. And if you notice how Tajikistan is carved up there, well, that's Stalin's doing, okay? Stalin in the 1930s came out with, let's have 5 states. I don't know why he decided to create them as 5 different states, but he did. And in doing so, he created these states, making them, you'll have to forgive me, I'm still suffering from my thing. No one knows why, or how, or for what reason, or at least I've been unable to find out what his logic was in carving these states up the way he did. I've heard a lot of theories, but the other point is there are about 6 different maps that he drew for these countries. The last map is the one that you see here, or at least presumably the last map. Yes?
Well, I read a theory that he wanted the states to fight in turns.
Yes, I've heard that theory, and that is a valid theory. He figured as long as they're fighting each other, they won't fight Soviet occupation. Which is great when you have this Soviet occupation, but when you don't have a Soviet Union, all you've got is a bunch of people in a country who don't like each other, which creates a problem in and of itself. Yes? Bukhara and Samarkand are part of Uzbekistan.
No, they are Tajik people.
Oh, yeah, I see what you're saying, yeah. Yes, and as we pointed out before, you've got to remember just about every empire that was an empire, with the possible exception of the Incas and the Aztecs, has gone through this area. The Turks who are now in Turkey actually come from around Kyrgyzstan and Uzbekistan. And as a point of fact, Uzbekistan, Uzbeks themselves basically became the primary rulers of most of what became these countries. The leadership of both Khiva, Bukhara, and Kokand, which were the main emirates in the 19th century, all the way to the 20th century, were basically run by Uzbeks. And that's why they're so much around. But the Turks of today in Turkey are basically all related. They all speak Turkic, with the exception of Kyrgyzstan, I'm sorry, which has a kind of a court Persian, ancient Persian, left over from the Persian Empire, which was there for a while, leaving their language. So it presents geographical challenges. Part of the problem is also, as you're going to see later on, is in the far east of our area, Tajikistan, Kyrgyzstan, they need energy desperately. They're very poor. They have hydroelectric power. They're trying to build hydroelectric dams to generate enough electricity for everybody to live happily, except for one problem. Downstream is Uzbekistan, which basically will have a heart attack if they do this because they rely upon this water and everything, and they don't want to have it tied up with these two countries. Now, the other thing is the geography is the Caspian Sea. Now, as some of you who followed our writings on this will know that there's a debate right now, or actually vicious arguments, over whether or not the Caspian Sea is actually a sea or is it a lake. And there are a lot of people who do not want this to be resolved. But it is a very important question. It's not just something, gee, what do we call it on a map? It has a lot of international implications. If it is a sea, for example, all of these countries here share the littoral. Out to their 12-mile limit, you have free navigation, and each country only gets those resources which are in its own littoral states. If it's a lake, they get to share it equally. Now, in the 1930s, 30s, I'm sorry, Stalin signed an agreement with the then Iranian government, Persian government, to share the Caspian Sea 50-50. Everybody's happy. Nobody has any complaints because Russia has what Russia has, and it was all Russian or Soviet. The Iranians were happy with this because it kept their parts going. Now, if it's a sea, Iran's share of the resources in the Caspian, and by the way, it is lousy with resources, gas, oil, all kinds, not just sturgeon. Back when Stalin did it, it was basically over sturgeons and things like this and fishing rights. Now it's over oil and gas. There are at least 4 major offshore operations in the Caspian Sea, and there are likely to be more. But is it a sea or a lake? Now, if it is a sea, Iran's portion of this drops down to 14%, and the big winners would be Turkmenistan, Azerbaijan, and Kazakhstan. But if it's a lake, they all share it, which means Iran's share will be 20%. And everybody claims they want this to be solved, but nobody wants, because what they're giving on one hand, they're losing on another. The Russians had a very unique solution to the problem, which I always thought was really great, came out last year. Why don't we say that the top part of it is the surface part of the water is a sea, and the bottom part is a lake. And the reason they want that is because also you can't do anything if it's a lake. You cannot do anything without the consensus of all the other partners of the lake. And what he's trying to do is, they're trying to build a pipeline from Turkmenistan to Baku, a gas pipeline, and then later an oil pipeline to run gas into Europe. Russia does not want this. She's adamant that this cannot happen. Ergo, basically, it's a lake on the bottom, because that's where the thing is, and they won't agree to it. The Iranians aren't too happy with it either, but they're kind of iffy on that subject one way or the other. They're not really big one way or another. Now, owing to the time constraints that we have here, I'd like to state from the beginning the premise of all this presentation, which is basically that I believe, with some proof I might add, that Russia, be it Russia, Imperial Russia, Soviet Russia, or the Russia of today, has a specific intent and is aggressively and has a specific intent in Central Asia of rebuilding its empire, of actually rebuilding what was the former satellites, and forcing these countries back into the Russian orbit. And you must remember that when Russia was Imperial Russia, and these were parts of the Imperial Empire, the Russians basically left the emirs and everybody in place. It was always a facade that the real government was, these people are happy, we're just here to protect them. That's why we have all the cannons pointing at them, so they will smile for the camera. Oh, cannon, sorry. that was a kind of theory on this. But you got to remember that this area also is considered and has been considered an area that Russia has considered and stated openly, almost year by year since the collapse of the Soviet Union, that this area is its near abroad, and President Putin has said this area is an area of primary and exclusive interest to Russia. Exclusive interest, you've got to remember that. That's very important. They don't like people messing around, and they're very much afraid of other people, especially like NATO now in Afghanistan and the northern supply route, interfering with their primary interests. Now, to achieve this, they are primarily using, I believe, oil and gas, and also to some extent, LNG and hydroelectric power through Rosneft and Gazprom to strong-arm both the suppliers and the sellers, i.e. the suppliers being the nations that we're looking at in Central Asia. And you've got to remember that Turkmenistan, Kazakhstan, Azerbaijan are lousy with energy, oil and gas. I mean, we're talking serious oil and gas deposits here. The new Kashgar oil fields they found just off the coast of Kazakhstan are just opening up all kinds of fields. Everybody's jumping into it. Even the Swiss oil companies are jumping into it. So it's, it's big. And then there's something called CASA 1000, which is Central Asian Supply something or other, which basically is to build hydroelectric plants in Tajikistan, Kyrgyzstan. Russia would supply the money for this. They promised the money, but they're not really coming through with it yet. But it's also to keep Uzbekistan kind of in line. Any nation, however, probably most nations, would and do support their energy companies and their interests. And this is not surprising. It shouldn't surprise anyone. Matter of fact, we're somewhat surprised when they don't do it. But in Russia uses these state entities, and Gazprom and Rosneft are, believe it or not, quite controlled by the state. And as I wanted to discuss with our friend, considered by many to be a wholly owned subsidiary of the former KGB FSB. I mean, if you look at their board of directors, they're all old KGB colonels and generals. And there have been some suspicions, shall we say, founded on some facts, that there's a possibility that possibly their spy network works through Gazprom in Europe and things like this. So it's not surprising. But it's not surprising that they would use this just for commercial gain, but as they're not using it rather as for commercial gain alone, or for commercial gain really, but as instruments of political and economic control of both supplier and end user of natural gas and oil coming from Russia or from Central Asia. It's just the way it's developed. It's not we're not looking just at commercial activity, but raw and sometimes brutal economic and political power being exerted. And believe me, it has gotten both raw and very brutal at times. Until 1997, Russia has had a complete monopoly of all the energy resources in Central Asia. This includes Azerbaijan and the other countries we've mentioned here, particularly Kazakhstan and Turkmenistan. The reason it had this is because that's where all the pipelines were. That's where all the transport systems were. Russia controlled it. So they would tell Turkmenistan, Kazakhstan, Azerbaijan how much money they would pay them for their gas and oil, which is usually dirt cheap, and they'd have to take it or not sell their gas and oil, which basically, let's face it, especially in the early 90s, these countries were on their backs. Economically, they had to take what they could get. So it's basically taking 10 cents on the dollar. However, this changed very dramatically, and not to Russia's benefit, between 1994 and 97, with the building of the BTC pipeline, which is the Baku-Tbilisi-Ceyhan pipeline of oil going from Baku to the Mediterranean, at that time considered one of the longest pipelines in the world. And this represented the first non-northern pipeline outlet for any former Soviet Union state. And it was a big blow to Russia. I mean, but it was 97, and they weren't really in a position to challenge, although they did fuss, they did fight, they threw hissy fits, but there was nothing they could do about it. And as an aside, I might add, this is how I got into this business here in the first place. I was walking through the Pentagon one day. Someone walked up to me, actually my boss's boss, and said, "You lived in Bakersfield, didn't you?" and I said, "Yes, I did. I grew up there, sir." And he said, "I got a job for you." And basically, it was to draft the Pentagon's, i.e. the Defense Department's, position paper on the BTC pipeline, which got me started on all this. And the thing they wanted to know is, should we support it as a DOD and possibly as the U.S., and if not, why not, and if so, why? And it took about a couple of months to put it all together. And you've got to remember that part of the reasoning for this was oil at that time was a very charming $37 a barrel. So, I mean, everybody had a good time. We all got free gas, and it fell from the sky, and we enjoyed ourselves. But it was, like I said, a very charming, 37 a barrel. But whether it made money or not, the theory was, and the State Department agreed with this for a change. I mean, not normally does that happen. I had to go back and check my facts. That this would free Azerbaijan from Russia, I mean, economically, and would open up its oil to this open market. Now, one thing you've got to understand about oil and the oil market is there's two things. One is called Brent, North Sea Brent Sweet, and Texas Intermediate oil, West Texas Intermediate oil. These are the two benchmarks for oil everywhere. And usually the two prices, Brent being the very best. I mean, this is like getting, premium unblended scotch, I mean, really good. The West Texas Intermediate is really good unblended scotch, but it's still not, the extra special reserve. Rest of the oil is all pegged to this. For example, Venezuelan crude is considered one of the worst crudes in the world. I mean, it's very dirty, takes a lot to refine it, a lot of extra steps one has to go through to refine it. It's rather dirty. And I mean, just to give you by comparison. And this is what we enter into in what we call, on the oil market at least, and it also happens now in the gas market with LNG, the spot market. Like, you can contract with a company to deliver to you so many millions or billions of cubic meters of gas or barrels of oil. Or you can go on what they call the spot market. There's a ship out there that's got all this oil. You offer them X amount of money for it, and bang, guess what? You got oil or gas, and they'll deliver it to you. It's a whole chaotic market. It's beautiful, and it's wonderful, and it's wondrous, and nobody really knows how it works. Not even the people who work in it. It's just that we're all on the same treadmill, running like little rabbits, going on that little thing. Can't get off, because if you do, the whole thing may collapse. So we just keep running with it. But that's the way the game is played. And you'll see some strangeness of that a little further down in this. Now, the BT pipeline, as I said, was the first non-northern route of Central Asian energy. Now it went east to west, and it was a great fight, as I said, with the Russian government. In 2009 came the next second blow to Russian attempts at hegemony in Central Asia, which was the explosion of the Turkmen pipeline, which ran from Turkmenistan over here through Russia, through Uzbekistan to Russia. The explosion occurred in their Kansner 4 gas transmission lines, and it threw Turkmenistan economy into a tither. Now you got to understand, 90% of Turkmenistan gas went to Russia at this time, and they were getting. Well, I'll get down to that in a minute. But anyway, who's at fault for this explosion? Although you can draw your own conclusions, is not germane to this discussion. It's really because it all happened at the time when the Russians were only paying very small prices, and I'll get to that in a little bit, to Turkmenistan, and Turkmenistan wanted more money. Basically, Russia was ripping them off. They were getting their gas almost for free. I mean, it's almost criminal what they did. But the interesting thing here was that China jumped into Russia's exclusive zone. Now, the strange part here is Russia seemed genuinely shocked at China's entrance into the Turkmen gas market. I mean, they were totally, absolutely flabbergasted. I don't understand why. I don't know how they were taken by surprise. They have a perfectly good spy network and things. The Chinese have been going for years, get to that, going into Turkmenistan, helping to build railroads, roads, hospitals, schools, all, by the way, along the route that this pipeline would take. I mean, it was beautiful. I mean, but they did it nicely. I mean, you've got to hand it to them.
Are they using local workers, or are they using Chinese
Both.
workers?
Both.
Charm offensive.
There's a charm offensive. It worked. Because, I mean, people have to remember this. There are two countries, basically, in South Asia that are desperate for energy. One is China, the other is India. The loser in all this is going to be India, by the way. I mean, she's just really, I mean, I kind of feel sorry for her. But China is desperate for energy. A steady, reliable supply of energy. She doesn't care where she gets it, who she gets it from. If she gets it from the devil or from a saint. She doesn't care. She just wants a reliable, safe, steady flow of energy. She needs it. And she needs it more and more desperately than many people in this country can possibly imagine. Okay? Now, the reason also the Chinese got to move in was that at the time, Russian pricing for Turkmen gas was less than $100 for 1,000 cubic meters. They were charging $300 and $400 for 1,000 cubic meters at the other end. And also, oh, by the way, they charged the Turkmen about $50 1,000 cubic meters of that 100 to send the gas through the pipelines. This is gas company. I mean, it's a great deal. You got it. But that's what I mean by a monopoly. They had this monopoly. And there's nothing that could interfere with that until actually the Chinese and other people jumped into it. Now, the Russians called the Turkmen ungrateful. They were more mad at the Turkmen for going with this deal than they were with the Chinese. Of course, you know, as to power politics, probably a little bit more too. But they were extremely livid with the Turkmen as a result. Anyway, in China, like I said, they built roads, they built all these other things. They built this new pipeline in record time, by the way. And not to mention, they were paying Turkmenistan $250, 8,000 cubic meters, and they weren't charging them transmission fees. I mean, hey, what a deal, you know? I like it. I want more of it, you know? Okay, now, until this time, Russia accounted for 90% of Turkmen gas exports. Now, the other 10%, by the way, went to Iran. Now, it's a dwindling, and it's not just it is a dwindling 40%. To Russia, yes. And I'm not sure how or why the Russians were taken by surprise. As I said before, they do have an intelligence service. The move should not have been expected, especially since most people in the whole oil community, or petroleum or energy community, if you will, all knew this was going to happen. That China was trying to get in. China didn't care. They just wanted the energy. And if you notice what they did, actually, if you look at what they were doing in Somalia and places like this when they first started, they did the same thing. They built roads. Gee, you know, all of a sudden a pipeline wound up on the road. They built schools. Oh, all of a sudden, workers were coming out of their schools. Hospitals for their workers. I mean, hey, I love it. You gotta love the way they work. And they really did. I mean, give them their due. They earned their right to do it. Or at least to try to do it.
What's to do with Chinese-Russian relations?
What's that? Well, that's what we're getting to. So just hang on for just. I've got a punchline here. Yes.
Clarify this, so 90% went to Russia.
Up until 2009, 90% went to Russia,
Russia, 50% China.
10% to India. No, to Iran.
Right, yeah.
Now,
50 to China.
yeah. Yes.
I have a question about that.
Sure.
So you said the oil spot market?
Yes.
Is like people running like rabbits on it.
Or dogs, or people running on treadmills. Yeah, the people in the gym. You see them going. But this is.
You also started to talk with a discussion of how to make rabbit soup first.
Yes, I did.
So
You're very clever to pick that up.
are we the rabbits that we're trying to catch to make soup?
No, I feel like I am really here. Okay.
What's China different, not to digress too much, but what's China doing with all this oil? They've got oil, northern Xinjiang.
They're using it.
Are they using
They're
it or
refining
putting
it.
in reserves?
Well, they're building up reserves, but no, there's not that much. Look, China went, I don't know if people remember this, but China, say 15 years ago, they were all on bicycles. Now they're all on automobiles. I mean, who is it? Levine, our guy Levine, the one that goes to China a lot, talks about how the smog is and all the other things.
Henry Levin.
Levin,
And
yes.
Paul Levine.
Darkness at noon.
Pardon?
Darkness at noon.
That's true.
The
Anyway,
largest automobile
like I said,
market.
the Russians should not have been taken by surprise. I mean, they really should. China simply needs the energy. She'll do what's necessary to get them, and that's all she wants. This is also, and like I said, the whole community saw this as coming. And why the Russians were caught completely by surprise by this, just beyond. I mean, sometimes they get so focused, and we'll get to that in a minute, that they don't know how to get out of it. All right. Now there's an east to west pipeline, and now there are about 3 of them, by the way, since 2009. There's one going now also from, guess where? Kazakhstan. Oh, hey, now Russia likes Kazakhstan. Kazakhstan has always played nice with Russia and been very nice and very quiet. And now all of a sudden, China is investing heavily in the Kashgar oil fields, which is the one off the Caspian Sea, as we know, and in the other oil and gas fields, and running pipelines, gee, guess what, to China, you see. I mean, it's really a surprise. I mean, surprise. And the Russians really don't know what to do about it. Okay, now, this whole idea of pipelines that are expanding, going east to west, west to east, out of Central Asia, are both fascinating, the growth and the amount and the demand. And it's expanding. Now, why you say, as brought over here, what is this going to do with China's mix? Why is this important? Why is China really important into this mix? Part of the problem is Russia's real asset. Russia's only real asset is energy. Selling gas and oil. Has some of the largest gas and oil reserves on the planet. Now you told me how to move this down, just to show you some.
Just rather than
Oh, okay. Okay, let me just show you something here if I can get it. Okay. Let's see.
somehow like clicking on the minus. Help that.
Where's, okay, there we go. Okay. Now, what we have here is the Bering Sea up here. Somewhere down here, I don't know if it's on the map, we just see, is Murmansk. Everybody remembers Murmansk from the war, right? I mean, all the ships going there and all that great stuff. I mean, really. Anyway, about 300 to 400 miles north of Murmansk, in the Bering Sea, is an oil field. Massive oil field. And a massive gas field. Massive. One of the biggest in the world. But it's in the Bering Sea, in the Arctic Circle, 400 miles north of Murmansk, which is close 6 months out of the year.
Is there ice there?
Yes.
Lots of ice.
Yes. The other part is, and I'm not going to go into this, is I won't draw it here on the map here, but the other part is The other part of this is that it's in northern Siberia. Massive oil and gas deposits. Massive. Trillions of cubic meters of gas. Of recoverable gas. Now that's the other thing, let me explain to you. There's something in the oil business known as the oil, you do an assessment of a field. A field has X amount of oil or gas. That doesn't mean it gets all of it. It's what we call recoverable oil. Okay? I mean, it's usually, if you get 60% of the gas and oil in a well, you're doing well. Okay? This is, otherwise, you're kind of sucking rocks. But you're not going to get much more than 60% until recently, which we'll get into in just a second again. Okay. Now, I want to also stress that there are also proposed pipelines throughout all of this area. I mean, the whole area has all kinds of proposed pipelines. One runs, and most of these are rather logical, make a lot of good logical economic sense, but they aren't going to happen. One of them is running a pipeline from Turkmenistan through Bashir, yeah. To Bashir, and also supplying gas to Iran, which needs more gas, by the way. They're kind of desperate for it because of the sanctions. They're not getting as much out of their gas fields as they would like, and they could use it. And also that in Bashir they were going to build a liquid natural gas plant. The other one is there's also a proposed Iranian pipeline to run from the oil fields and off here through Pakistan to India, which needs it desperately. Isn't going to happen because A, Iran can't get the financing. B, India's got to trust Pakistan to deliver the oil, gas going through it. And if they stop doing it, is that going to be the cause of a war? The other pipeline, the other big one that's not going to happen, is called the TAPI pipeline, which is Turkmenistan, Afghanistan, Pakistan, India, which has all the same problems, throwing in Afghanistan and the most unruled parts of Pakistan on the planet. So it isn't going to happen. ExxonMobil, Conoco, and BP have all invested millions, literally millions, into investigating and trying to get these this pipeline up. They even brought, very seriously, they even brought some Taliban leadership to Houston, offered them $100 million a year to protect the pipeline, if they would. The deal was almost signed, and then it just, for whatever reason, fell apart. So this is how lucrative and how important this is to this area. But anyway, as I said, Russia's real and only real asset is its energy. Russia has an abundance of these riches, and especially oil and gas, with some of the largest recoverable deposits in the world. The problem is what? Anybody know?
Transport.
No. Got plenty. They got to sell it. Someone has to buy it. But if Turkmenistan and Azerbaijan and now Kazakhstan are selling to their customers, their share of the market goes down. And it gets even better. Russia is, according to many people, a petrol economy, same as Saudi Arabia. I mean, it is no different in many ways. It has to sell its energy to maintain its economy. In short, according to the Russian economist, and again, I must apologize, as Roman has pointed out to me, my command of Slavic names is rather limited. An economist by the name of Sergei Guriev, who was the Morgan Stanley Professor of Economics at the New Economics School in Moscow, which is supposed to be a very prestigious school,
He's not
And,
from Paris, but he's came from Russia.
pardon?
He's not from Paris.
Yes, I know. You stole my line here. You see, that's okay. I'll forgive you. But he made the case that Russia's economy is a basket case. It is on life supports. And the two tubes of the life support system are Rosneft and Gazprom. That's the only thing supporting the economy. And as a matter of fact, they're trying to figure out how to squeeze more money out of Gazprom and Rosneft to support the new budget coming out. And they can't do it. Well, they can, but the oligarchs from the old KGB who are running these things don't want to give up their cash cows. I mean, it's their piggy banks. I mean, let's face it, all of them now are billionaires with a B billionaires, which, you know, poor little state workers, you know, toiling away for the working class. Go for it, you know. Okay, but anyway, that's his point. And of course, he did leave Moscow, and as soon as he left Moscow for a conference in Paris, the first thing he did was not kiss his wife. Well, maybe he kissed his wife, but then went over to the embassy and said, "I want political asylum in France," because the Russian government had threatened to arrest him for making this statement. But, you know. Anyway, in the past, Russia could dictate the prices it would pay Central Asia and the amount it would charge for the delivery of that gas or oil. It had a monopoly. It used its gas especially and pegged its price to customers to oil. And I mean, this basically raised the price of their gas because it's pegged to the price of oil. And for those of you who really are interested in this, I can't imagine why, but for those of you who care, Russian gas, I mean, oil spot prices, the way people figure the cost of a barrel of oil for Russia to maintain its economy is around $96 to $97 a barrel. So I mean, and right now, if I'm not mistaken, it's around 102. I could be mistaken there.
So they're in the same fix they were in during Reagan, when it went below about $10. They
Yeah. Oh yeah. Yeah. No, very seriously.
So
But
they haven't learned a thing.
And so they also had this demand that they had on most of their customers. And this is on the other end of the supply chain, called a take-or-pay contract, which is basically a simple contract that if you contract for 10 billion cubic meters of gas and you only use 8, you're still paying for 10. And they demand long-term contracts for the most part. Now, as you noticed on this little handout that I gave to you, you'll notice that the pricing for gas, natural gas, I don't have the price for oils, I couldn't find it. But if you find the pricing for oil, gas rather, the rhyme or reason of why, say, Ukraine pays 450 1,000 cubic meters, and a country like the UK pays only 313, which is a lot further away and harder to get to. It is what they can get. Now, what they can get is getting lower and lower. Actually, the Ukraine is supposed to be paying $550 per 1,000 cubic meters, except they knocked off a price for a few 6 months or 8 months because of the Black Sea Fleet and a few other disputes that they had. They're also trying to force the Ukraine into giving them their pipelines. Problem here, Ukraine wants to join the EU. And if there's something in the EU, it's a new thing, it came into effect, I think, well, a couple months back, I think in July or June, called the Third Energy Package from the EU. And basically what this is a way of increasing competition and avoiding an energy monopoly, i.e., if you're going to be a supplier, you can't own the pipeline. If you're going to own the pipeline, you can't be a direct distributor. Okay? Everything is broken up. Now, this to many people seemed at the time a lot easier said than done. And admittedly, it kind of was. Except now, because of all kinds of new and wondrous technology that's come out in the past 10 years in particular, actually 20, this is all changing. And Russia can no longer treat its customers, be they suppliers or end users, in a shoddy fashion that they've been using. It's been very strong arm, very, very brutal. For example, right now Moldova, you'll notice, has some of the cheapest gas prices going. What did the Deputy Prime Minister of Russia say to the President of Moldova just 3 days ago? You join EU, we're going to cut off all your gas. You're going to freeze to death this winter. He basically said, I mean, this is, I mean, you got to love them this way. I mean, no offense to them, but you got to love them when they're that blunt. You know, hey, play ball with us or we'll, you know, really mess you about. And that's what they've done. But anything, this world that Russia does not quite fully understand, I think, has changed. It's not just recently the shale gas and oil in Europe, the large deposits in the Ukraine and Poland in particular, and Romania to some degree. This is part of it. But part of it is the ability of transmission lines. Part of it is well, I'll get back to that, but part of it is also this recoverable thing. Like the U.S. this year produced more oil than Russia. I mean, because of our shale, not just our shale, but because we went back to West Texas and all these places that we thought were dried up fields, and we now have the technology to go in and get the other 40%. You see, I mean, this is cool. I mean, you gotta love it, you know, these Texans, they're cool. I don't care what you say, they're okay. Anyway, this is, now there's real competition. There's also real competition, oddly enough, from the one program that Putin had supported the most, which is the LNG program. You got to understand, if you don't know this, Shell Oil built for Russia a LNG plant, liquid natural gas plant, on the Sakhalin Islands. Now, if you don't know what the Sakhalin Islands are, they're way over here, north of Japan. Japan wants them back. They're not going to get it. But hey, you know, they live and dream and hope. Okay, Shell Oil built them this. Why did Shell Oil do this? Well, because they were invited to, and because Russia did not have the technology to do this. As soon as they got it there, they got it going, what did the Russians do? They told Shell Oil, thanks a lot for the present, enjoy your stay in Russia, and make sure you turn off the lights on your way out the door. Basically, they did this. They tried it with some trumped-up charge of tax evasion and all kinds of things, which also taught Shell Oil, by the way, and a lot of other oil companies, when you do business with Russia, you always make sure you're adjudicated in London or in your contracts in London or New York. You
It
don't.
was repeated again with BP Tenka.
Pardon?
It was repeated, the same story was repeated with Tenka BP.
Yes. So you see, that's another thing. But the interesting thing also is, now why this is interesting is LNG has become this sexy little toy for a lot of companies. It's expensive, but it is more viable than I thought it would be. And what is interesting is, if you look at the price on your little thingy here, that Ukraine is paying for its gas per 1,000 cubic meters. They're getting it from Germany on reverse flow. They have these pipelines running from that are Gazprom at one time, or old Soviet pipelines really, that ran from the Ukraine to Germany. Okay, well, we have this new technology where we can reverse flow it. So RWE, the big German energy company, has all this liquid natural gas. And they said, hey, would you like to buy it? And they said, sure, how much? $3.25. Oh, hey, what a deal, sometimes even cheaper, because it's on a spot market. And the irony of it is, it's gas from Gazprom. I mean, it's Gazprom gas. The same gas they're burning at $400 or $450. So this is part of the whole change in their market. This is the whole change in the whole system. And the whole system in the oil business is literally changing. I mean, right now, as I say, Ukraine has paid as little as $290 per 1,000 cubic meters to RWE. And RWE did make a profit. They're Germans. They've got to make a, I mean, let's face it. I mean, they're not going to not make a profit. And then that for $3.40. Anyway, And it's Gazprom gas. Gazprom is having a hissy fit over this. They're going bananas. I mean, but they're selling it to Germany on a spot market at what price? Well, probably lower than that, because Germany, as I said, is going to make a profit. Now, the important part to remember in that, or at least to me, it seems, is that oil and gas industries are I mean, look, I've been studying it for years. I mean, I decided to get the Australian.
Oh, Martin Story.
Martin Story, and I've been doing this, and he's got me into a BA program for petroleum engineering. To drill one oil well, an exploratory oil well at that, in, like say here, out here in the backyard here, minimum costs $20 million in 5 years to 6 years if you do it rapidly. It can take up to 10 years and $40 million before you even put the drill bit down in the ground. You go offshore, you're talking hundreds of millions of dollars. These companies aren't messing around. But they have all these new technologies, as I said. And they're coming online almost every day. Something new comes out. It's a fascinating field. But I'm going to take you back, because I started with this. When I was a boy in Bakersfield, basically, I mean, I know it wasn't this simple. I really do. But a long time ago, it was basically you drilled a hole in the ground, and if oil came up, you're doing okay. Otherwise, you got a dry hole, and you move on, and you lost your investment. Today, before they even start drilling, they're pretty sure what they're going to find there. I mean, it's not a hit or miss thing. And the technology has changed so much. I mean, these drilling fields, the fields go down 3,000 and 4,000 feet or more, looking for oil or gas or both. And that's not talking about shale. And if you want to talk about shale, where I come from, Kern County in California, originally, is basically shale capital in the U.S. They have more shale oil and gas in Kern County than they do in North Dakota and South Dakota and all these other places they're drilling in Pennsylvania combined. And there is a massive natural gas and oil, shale oil deposit just off, in California. But it'll never be drilled. And I'll tell you why, by telling you its name. It's called the Monterey Shale Deposit. There is no way the lids living in Monterey are going to have their view disturbed with natural. They'll ride horses first. They will ride bicycles first. Or trust me, it's just. But the other but is you can now slant drill almost 40 miles or so. I mean, that miles, not just and that's not easy. And you can slant drill 3 or 4 pipelines at the same time out of the same hole. I mean, it's really amazing how we do it. I mean, yeah, I know. Yeah. So,
How much water does that take?
what's that?
I say, how much water does that take?
Takes quite a bit of water.
It does. It takes lots of water, chemicals, and sand.
No, it's called drilling mud. It's called drilling mud. It's called drilling mud. It's drilling mud. Yes, but the thing is, what you're forgetting is this water is recycled. Every oil field. I know I'm not going to get into it with you, but what I'm saying to you is that every oil, especially exploratory well, and most wells now have 3 or 4 and sometimes 5 different catch basins in which they purify, because every time you drill through the hole, something's got to come up. I mean, you just can't it just doesn't go away. So it comes up. What they do is they purify it, they find out what is useful and what isn't, and they repump the water back down. They repump as much of the drilling mud as possible. It's like we're like with North Sea gas. They're not even allowed to flare in North Sea gas. I don't know if you know, flaring is where they burn off the methane that comes off. Okay, they're not even allowed to do that. So what do they do with this gas? You can't just let it go in the air, you know. I mean, that isn't good. So they find a way of disposing of it and reusing it someplace else for some other products. I mean, it's actually starting to make them money in some cases. Gotta hand it to the capital system for that.
Norm, can I have a question?
Yes.
The prices you got here for this 1,000 cubic meters
Yes.
in dollars US, can you give us a perspective? What do we pay in the United States in dollars for 1,000?
I've been trying to get somebody to talk to me about that, and they keep sending you these formulas that when you try to work them out, if I had a calculus calculator with graph, I could probably do it, but it's about we're paying probably around 300. I mean, I'm just saying, just roughly. I mean, different places would be paying different prices
So we pay
because
a
of
little bit less than they're
where you are next to it and all these things. And as I said, there are literally hundreds of, well, dozens at least, of proposed pipelines throughout Central Asia, and each one is going either east to west or west to east. It's just the nature of the beast. And all of this is important in a possible real area of instability, especially between Russia and China, as these are going to be the two centers of gravity, I believe, in the coming year, especially when it comes to energy competition and challenges. And the shift, once again, and an energy shift, as I say, the centers of gravity of the customer base and the supplier base are constantly changing now. Now, the one fact remains that for Russia, beyond any imperial dreams it may have of reestablishing itself in Central Asia, which I do believe, as I said earlier, that she is trying, that energy imports from Russia account for 40 to 50% of its national budget. That's a lot when you consider this. And as I said, and I mean this is why I wanted you weren't here, both Rosneft and Gazprom in particular are looked upon by many people as subsidiaries of the KGB, now FSB. I mean, I don't know, do people retire from that? I mean, I know you did, but I mean, do generals and things like that really retire?
Out of Gazprom brings $90 billion.
Yes.
It's out of 18 directors, 11 are nominated by Putin, and they come directly from the JUN.
Right. Yeah, and Putin's on the board, and Putin's got about 4 or 5 billion from this already himself. I mean, you know, I don't know, just they gave it to him as a golden parachute or bowler or whatever they call it. Anyway.
They say he's worth 80 billion.
Right. In the meantime, Russia is gearing, I think the problem is for Russia, though, is that it is gearing almost all of its defenses, all of its consciousness toward the challenges it perceives coming from both the United States and or the EU and or the NATO. As a matter of fact, just recently, our old friend, the Deputy Prime Minister, and a couple of other Russians have gone absolutely ballistic over what they perceive as the Poles trying to influence the Crimean Tatars to break away from the Ukraine. I mean, they're absolutely, I mean, they're kind of, you know, talked about your conspiracy theory. But there was a time, you got to understand, when Poland defeated the Soviet army in the 20s, they did try, there was I forget the name of the program, but it's polarization or something, but anyway, to separate the Crimean Tatars from the Ukraine, to break up Russia's strength there. Now you got to remember also, Ukraine is considered by Russia to be Little Russia, although it's very small sometimes the way they treat them. But it's the way they look at it. And they're trying to get, as I said, Ukraine's gas depositories. Ukraine's got this lousy with these big caves and things that they store natural gas in, because you can only send so much through, and then you have to store it. Well, the Ukraine is the perfect place to store it. And they want those, and they also want Ukraine's pipelines for what they call their South Stream project, which is a way of trying to bust the EU third package that we talked about earlier. Now, in the meantime, Russia is, though, gearing up its defenses, as I said, towards both the U.S. and the EU and or NATO and or individual countries like Poland, and it's really neglecting, I believe. I mean, it's not for me to tell them what to do. I mean, hey, you know, more power to them. But it is going to create some stability, because I think someday they are going to wake up and they're going to find the real challenge economically and perhaps politically is coming from China, not from the U.S., not from the EU, and not from NATO. Any questions? Any other remaining questions? Kind of answered a lot. Yeah?
Yeah, since Russia's economy is very much dependent on
Yes.
their selling their own, what would you think is it their interest that there will be trouble in the Middle East oil producing?
Well, it would help them because it would raise the price of oil if there's much more turmoil. But you got to remember too, also, I forgot to add this, because this is also very different. Pardon? Oh, yes. Oh, okay. Yeah. It would be destabilizing. But there was a recent, in the Barents Sea, there is a Gazprom oil rig, and I don't know why Gazprom is getting into the oil business, but they seem to want to be in the oil business too. Out in the Barents Sea, about 400 miles north of Murmansk, and Greenpeace went out there to say, don't do this, it's a bad thing. We like horses and things, and little green thingies. Don't do this. And Putin, although he denies this, ordered the FSB border troops to not only stop them and arrest them, but to charge them with piracy, and don't be too nice about how you arrest them.
Even the photographer.
What's that?
Even the photographer.
Yes, yeah. So what I'm saying is, what it really showed is, actually it happened while Putin was at an Arctic conference somewhere in northern Russia, trying to tell people how nice he was and how he believes that with global warming there's going to be this northern route, and Russia wants 50% of it. And they're adamant about this, but also you don't mess with the piggy bank. And this is the piggy bank. Okay? Now, yes?
And, well, what about, we're talking about further north, but without going to the sea.
I can't hear you. I'm sorry.
Sorry. I was thinking that, what about going further north, but not to the Barents Sea? What about other places in Siberia?
Oh, all right. That's a good question. It's there, but they don't have the technology to do ice, frozen drilling.
And how long that will take? Because,
I don't know. I mean, they're trying to get somebody to do it, but you're looking. This is shows you what you're looking at. They're looking at their cost, $40 billion with the B dollars, to develop this and to try to ship it to China. And they don't have a customer for it. They hope they've been negotiating for the last 10 years with China to sell this gas from Siberia to China, which would be, if it didn't have all this ice and snow and all the other stuff, not a bad deal. But they want to charge them about $400 a cubic meter, and China says, no, we're going to pay less than EU prices. And so China has gone, and like I said, gone to these other places, and she's paying $350 to $250.
Okay, thank you.
But I believe they signed the contract with China for $4 billion.
Pardon?
They signed the contract with China, I believe. Putin is very proud. $4 billion. For the supplies for the next 20 years.
Oh, okay. For 20 years, I mean, hey.
And what they prefer now is they prefer drilling somewhere else, like Venezuela, and
Well,
other places
yes.
where it's much cheaper.
Well, the other thing is that this LNG plant on the Sakhalin Island was supposed to sell liquefied natural gas to the U.S., and his whole plan was Russia was going to take 10% of our market. Now we're exporting it, I mean, we're importing it, rather. We're getting it out of it. We're just exporting it. We're exporting it to other countries. We're just lousy with it. Like I said, we're producing more of it than Russia this year. And part of the problem also with Russia is you got to understand their energy infrastructure is really old. I mean, for the most part, it is extremely old. It's old Soviet, Stalin Soviet, in many cases. I mean, if you go to Baku today, by the way, you'll see what they've done to modernize their whole oil industry. And they've done away with these wooden derricks and all this other stuff the Soviets left them with, which is really kind of a shame, but anyway, that's another thing. But the point is that most of their infrastructure in Russia itself, the part that is producing, is very old technology, and getting parts sometimes when things break, because it's old, it does break, is almost, it's Herculean. Sometimes they have to machine tool the parts themselves. I mean, that's that bad. You just can't go to the store and buy one.
You haven't even taken into account the insane bureaucracy.
I'm sorry?
You haven't taken into account their insane bureaucracy.
Oh, well, that gives us this, it goes without saying, but the thing is that our bureaucracy is just as bad, I think, sometimes. But no, I understand what you're saying. I mean, so are there any other questions? Do people understand that basically I'm just saying China is a real threat to Russia economically and politically in Central Asia and is reestablishing its hegemony. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Robert,
That means a lot.
if you slide, Robert, if you slide